Chapter 261, Two Kings at a Dinner Party, 2-in-1. Benjen changed the subject. The Night's Watch situation is still not good. The wall is colder than here. The gift's soil is barren and rocky, free folk harass us constantly, and the harvest isn't enough to support the brothers who man the wall. If it weren't for the food from the trade ships, we wouldn't be self-sufficient. Worry lined his face. It's still summer now, but it's getting colder beyond the wall. Winter is coming. The gift's yield will shrink, and Eastwatch by the Sea's port may freeze, making transport impossible. The Night's Watch could face disaster. Southern lords rarely send aid. They think we're a place for criminals, thieves, and rapists, and don't understand why the watch matters. Arthur, we need help. He gripped Arthur's hands. Benjen meant the gift in two parts. Brandon's gift and the new gift, 50 leagues south of the wall, from the Bay of Ice to the Shivering Sea. The west was higher, mountains, hills, woods, grading into rolling plains to the east. Arthur listened to the litany of concerns and summed it up in his head. I'm the Night's Watch. Give me money. No wonder Benjen looked so pressed. He'd come straight away without a moment's delay. King Robert was here. Surely Benjen had asked him, but Robert was Robert. Arthur kept his thoughts to himself and said plainly, Uncle Benjen, speak plainly. How do you need my help? Arthur believed in the importance of the wall. The watch stood as the realm's first line of defense against others and whites, a Maginot line of ice. A relatively small investment of supplies and men could have an outsized effect. Few would willingly fight the fearless dead, and if the others could raise the dead, any breach would only compound. He was more than willing to help supply the watch and keep the threat outside the wall. Benjen's face softened into a relieved smile. He rubbed his hands awkwardly. The Lord Commander at the wall had specifically instructed him to seek Arthur's support on this trip. Supplies would be most welcome, of course, Benjen said. But there's another thing. We'd like you to come see the gift with me and help choose a place to plant a peach orchard. I brought supplies for the Night's Watch on this trip. Arthur stood and motioned for Benjen to follow. As for the peach trees, once we have that settled, I'll go with you to the wall. John followed outside with Ghost. Arthur called to Balon Shiwen, who told him the cargo wagons were in the warehouse by the armory. Specifically brought for us? Benjen asked, puzzled. What supplies? Weapons, longswords. Arthur led Benjen to the warehouse. Two guards warming themselves by the fire nodded as they followed him in. There's no need for a show, Benjen said. We can take whatever you give us when we head north. These are a little special, Arthur motioned. At his signal, the guards pried open a wooden crate. Inside, among straw, lay 5 identical longswords. Benjen's eyes lit at the sight. The scabbards and hilts spoke of fine workmanship and costly materials. I call these dragon crystal swords. Arthur took one, gripped the hilt, and drew it. The blade slid free with a clear, crisp note. At the transition between blade and spine, 2 faint layered lines could be seen. The blade's color was deep and dull, almost lacking metallic sheen, as if it weren't freshly honed. Darker brown patterns marred it in places. The rest of the sword caught the light with a metallic glint. John frowned at the sword's rough appearance. Arthur, that looks unappealing. It's made of iron and obsidian, Arthur explained. Obsidian, dragon crystal, was a weapon of the children of the forest. I think this might be useful against the others or other ancient spirits. Benjen took the sword, ran his finger along the blade, and cut himself. A bead of blood arose where he had touched it. The others? John's surprise showed. They're only the ancient spirits from old Nan's tales. Why would you? He stopped as a memory came to him. The trick Arthur had shown earlier, the way Dawn had glowed. Arthur added, there are ancient records in the library tower at Dragonstone. I suspect obsidian has something to do with Valyrian steel forging. These dragon crystal swords are a result of our research. They were made by fine smiths. In quality and sharpness, they outclass most longswords. Benjen swung the sword once, listening to its clear ring, and grew fond of it. This is indeed a fine blade. These swords are limited and difficult to make, Arthur said. Only 70 are forged in a year. Please see that they go to the elite rangers of the Night's Watch. Benjen nodded, replaced the sword in the crate, and had it resealed. He assigned one of his men to guard the wagon alongside the others. Once matters were settled, The two men fell into conversation, Benjen answering Arthur's questions about the lands and the people beyond the wall. Benjen described the free folk. They called themselves the free folk and answered to no king, lord, or law. They chose leaders by preference. Women could take up arms and fight alongside men. Those who did were called spearwives. Children had high mortality, and the free folk believed naming a child before two brought ill luck. Raiding across the wall was a rite of passage. Their weapons were mostly stone, wood, and bronze. Stone axes, fire-hardened spears and javelins, longbows of wood and bone. Armor was leather or sheepskin patched and stitched. Shields were woven willow. Their horses were sure-footed but rare. In Arthur's estimation, the free folk beyond the wall were similar to the free folk of the Red Mountains, where farming was impossible, people grew harder and rougher, relying on force and plunder. Benjen rarely spoke of the landscape beyond the wall. When he did, it was simply white snow, ice plains, and forests. He told the tale of Sir Waymar Royce's reconnaissance. He had ridden beyond the wall to track raiders and never returned. "When I get back to the wall," Benjen said, "I'll go beyond the wall to find him. Dead or alive, I must know what happened." Arthur, who knew the original tale, suspected Sir Waymar had already been reanimated as a wight. John remembered Waymar's visit to Winterfell months before, when he had come with his father, Jon Royce. Sansa had admired him as a prince from a poem. Arthur thought of the handsome knight now as a shambling corpse. Benjen also warned of a new king beyond the wall, Mance Rayder, who had united many tribes. "He is a greater threat to the Watch and perhaps the realm than any king before," Benjen said gravely. "Is he strong, clever?" John asked. Benjen shook his head. "I've not seen him, but he was once of the Night's Watch. He understands us better than any other king beyond the wall. An enemy who knows you is far more dangerous than a merely clever or strong one, and he's become their king." They spoke into the afternoon, right up until the eve of the welcome feast for the king. Arthur slipped away to the hot springs in Winterfell's Godswood to wash the grime from his journey and bathe the weariness from his bones. Clean and changed, he entered the great hall. Steam hung in the air above roasted meat and fresh loaves, and the scent of peach pies drifted through the hall. The gray stone walls were hung with banners: House Stark's white direwolf, Baratheon's crowned stag, Lannister's crimson lion among them. A singer in one corner plucked a harp, but his song was nearly swallowed by the crackle of the great fire, the clink of goblets, and the lord's loud talk. On the high table, Benjen moved with proper courtesy, but looked more constrained than Arthur had ever seen him. His gaze kept skimming the hall, hollow and distracted. King Robert, 2 seats down, drank with his usual abandon, laughing loudly, slapping shoulders, and devouring every dish as if he'd starved for a year. Queen Cersei sat like a statue of ice beside him. Arthur guessed why Robert had been anxious to see Winterfell's crypts. Lyanna Stark haunted him like a white moonlight. Arthur walked around the far end of the table to a minstrel tuning a lute. He was a broad-shouldered man of medium height with long graying brown hair and laugh lines around his mouth. "Could you play something livelier?" Arthur asked. The man made room when a free rider stepped back. "Certainly, my lord." He changed the rhythm. The tune brightened into "The Bear and the Maiden Fair." Arthur took a cup of peach wine from a serving girl and listened as he drank. "Well played. What's your name?" "Bale." Bale stuffed a piece of roasted meat into his mouth, wiped grease on his sleeve, and looked at Arthur in mild surprise. "My lord, why don't you sit at the high table? It's livelier down here." Arthur finished half a crust of bread and sipped more wine. He leaned closer to Bale. "Your stage name must be from the old legend. When I was a child, old Nan told me that tale. Tell it again, if you please." At once the men around the table began tapping their spoons and nudging one another. The serving girls and servants drew in to hear. Bale hesitated a moment at the mention of his name, then smiled. "Of course, a minstrel's life is to tell tales." He cleared his throat and set his fingers to the strings. The hall quieted. "This happened 1,000 years ago, when the Starks were kings in the north," Bale began. "Back then, the king of the north was Brandon Stark. There was a bard called Bale the Bard. To prove himself and to avenge a slight, Bale climbed the wall and came south along the King's Road, finding his way into Winterfell as a singer. Bael's lute set the story afloat on a plaintive melody. Bael played for the Lord of Winterfell until midnight. The king was so moved he asked what reward the bard desired. Bael asked only for a single flower, the brightest that bloomed in Winterfell's garden. Winter roses were in bloom, and Brandon granted the request. But the next morning, both the singer and the king's daughter were gone. Only a winter rose lay on the cold, empty bed. The king sent the Night's Watch to search beyond the wall, but neither the singer nor the girl were ever found. For a time, the house seemed to end, until the girl returned with a baby in her arms. In truth, they had not gone, but had hidden in the crypts. Bael's bastard with the Stark daughter grew to inherit the North. Decades later, Bael himself became king beyond the wall and led the free folk south. He met his own son in battle at the Ice Ford. He could not strike his own blood, and so his son struck him down. The king of the North came back with Bael's head. The woman who had loved the minstrel, seeing that kinslaying, threw herself from the high tower in grief. Some say that the son fell under a curse for kinslaying and was later captured and flayed alive by his enemies. When Bael finished, the hall applauded his telling and the tune that had carried it. Chapter 262, Showdown, 2-in-1. It was after midnight, in the great bedchamber of Winterfell. Ned drew back the heavy brocade curtains and opened the tall, narrow windows one by one, letting the night air sweep into the room. His face was shadowed with worry. Robert had ridden south to the crypts to offer him the office of Hand of the King, yet Ned felt his duty belonged here, in the north. Catelyn, wrapped in blankets and propped against the bedposts, watched him and said gently, "Ned, a king's pride is everything to him. Robert has ridden 1,000 miles to honor you. You cannot refuse him outright. That would be like slapping him in the face." "Honor?" Ned laughed without mirth. "In Robert's eyes, there's no higher honor." "And in yours?" Catelyn countered. "A year ago you went south for Brandon's sake, willingly stepping into the chaos. Now Robert has come with his court to invite you. If you refuse, everyone will see you value your bonds with a bastard cousin more than your friend the king." Ned's brows nodded. "These are two different things. In Robert's eyes and mine, they are the same." Catelyn rose and moved to stand beside him at the windows. "The king is even willing to let his heir marry Sansa. What could be more glorious? Sansa might one day be queen, and her children could rule from the Wall to Dorne. Isn't that what we want?" "Sansa is only 11, Ned said softly. "And Joffrey, he is the crown prince," Catelyn interrupted. "I was 12 when my father betrothed me to your brother Brandon." Ned's mouth tightened. Brandon knew how to move. He had plans, confidence. "I never asked for this cup." A cold wind came in and made Catelyn pull her cloak tighter. "Brandon is dead, Ned. The cup is offered now. Like it or not, you must drink." He turned back to the darkness beyond the window. They waited in the chill until a sharp knock rapped at the door, jarring at that hour. Ned frowned. "Who is it?" Outside, the guard Desmond's voice answered. "My lord, Maester Luwin waits and says he has urgent business." "Did you tell him I ordered not to be disturbed?" Ned asked. "Yes, my lord. He insisted." "Very well. Bring him in." Ned pulled a heavy robe around him while Catelyn closed the windows and sat on the bed. When the door shut behind him, Maester Luwin spoke, apologetic. "My lord, forgive me. Someone left a letter." Ned's face changed. "A letter? Who brought it? A messenger came today." "It was not a messenger. Someone placed an intricately carved wooden box on my desk in the observatory while I was asleep. My man saw no one go in or out. It was left by someone with access to the king. There have been no other visitors from the south." Catelyn leaned forward. "A wooden box. It held a fine glass lens, Mirish work, perhaps. Lord Arthur once sent me many such lenses." Ned frowned. "What's that to do with us?" "The purpose of a lens," Luwin said, touching the chain at his throat, "is to help you see the truth." He unrolled a tightly bound letter from his sleeve. "I took the box apart and found a false bottom. The real letter was hidden inside, but it is not meant for me." "Give it to me," Ned said. Luwin hesitated. "It is addressed only to Lady Catelyn." Catelyn's fingers trembled as she took the envelope. The seal was a drop of blue wax stamped with a new moon and a falcon, the sigil of House Aelin. Her voice shook. "It's from Lysa. I can feel it. This will hold sorrow." Ned's face went hard. "Open it." She broke the seal and read, At first, the words meant little, then the old shared language of their childhood made sense of the letter. Lysa is careful, she doesn't take risks, Catelyn said. When we were young, she and I made a private language only the two of us knew. This letter, it was planned and hidden as if she knew her life would depend on it. Luwin moved to leave. Perhaps I should. No, Catelyn said, and set the letter into the fire she had just lit, piling logs atop it. We need your counsel. Ned took her arm and helped her to her feet. Tell me, he demanded. What does it say? It's a warning, Catelyn said, forcing the words out. If we are wise enough to heed it. She looked at him. Lysa says Jon Arryn did not die of sickness. He was murdered by the Lannisters, by the Queen herself. Nonsense, Ned breathed sharply. Lysa is grieving. She doesn't know what she's saying. She knows, Catelyn said. She put the letter where only someone would find it who could do something and risk everything. She'd never take such a danger without cause. Ned's face went stony. Then I must go south, she said. You must be the hand of the king. You must go and find the truth. Ned bowed his head. The south is full of vipers. I should stay away. Maester Luwin spoke quietly. The office of hand holds power. If the hand can use that power, he can uncover what happened to Lord Arryn and bring the killer to justice. He could also protect Lady Aelin and her son. And Lord Arthur was in King's Landing when Lord Arryn died. He may know more. Ned paced, helpless. Catelyn watched him, knowing she could not follow him now. For the children, for Winterfell, she must be firm. You loved Robert like a brother, she said. Can you bear to leave your brother surrounded by Lannister men? May the gods take you both, Ned muttered. He turned his back to the room and stared out into the night. After a long moment, he came back, his voice hoarse. My father went south once when the king called him. He never came back. The times are different, said Maester Luwin, and the king is different. Ned sank into a chair by the hearth. Catelyn, you will remain at Winterfell. No, she said, fear rising in her voice. You must, he said without room for argument. While I serve the king, a Stark must hold Winterfell. Robb is 14. He must learn to rule. I cannot be there to teach him. Include him in your counsels. See that he is ready when the time comes. Gods keep you, Luwin said. Maester Luwin will do what he can. I have always thought of Winterfell as my home. I will advise your lady and teach your children what they must know. Do not forget, winter is coming. Maester Luwin bowed his head. Silence fell until Catelyn asked the question she had dreaded. What of the other children? Ned took her in his arms. Rickon will stay here with you and Robb. The others will go south with me. You cannot take them, Catelyn cried. Bran. When I was sent south as a ward, I was 8, Ned said. Sir Roderick says Robb and Prince Joffrey do not get on. Bran can be a bridge between the houses. He is a sweet boy. Let him grow up near the prince. Let friendship grow as it did between Robert and me. It will strengthen us. Just keep him away from the high towers, Catelyn said, biting her lip. You know how he loves to climb. Ned kissed the tears on her cheeks. Thank you. I know this wounds you. Maester Luwin cleared his throat. What of Jon Snow? Catelyn trembled and went still. Ned felt her anger and pulled away from her. There came another knock at the door, harder than before. All three tensed. Who is it? Ned called. My lord, Lord Arthur Snow waits and says it is urgent, Desmond answered. Their faces exchanged a quick look. Let him in, Ned said. Arthur entered briskly, something about him taut with purpose. He shut the door behind him. Uncle, Lady Stark, Maester Luwin, there are suspicious circumstances surrounding Jon Arryn's death. Ned seized him by the shoulder. What do you know? Arthur told what he knew, that Lord Jon had summoned him and Stannis, intending to reveal that the king's 3 children were not Robert's but the issue of the queen's incest. The 3 in the room, having read Lysa's letter, were not wholly unprepared, yet Arthur's words still cut deep. Ned let him go and paced the room. If that is true, Catelyn whispered, then that explains why Jon was killed. Why did Stannis and you not tell the king after Jon's death? Ned asked Arthur. The proof was with Lord Jon, Arthur said. Stannis and the king have never been close. Stannis feared his accusation would be seen as ambition rather than truth. And the king and I, we barely spoke. Who would have believed us? Ned breathed out slowly. Arthur sat by the hearth and outlined the state of King's Landing in those last days. House Lannister's influence has been spread through the Red Keep. Many guards wore their colors, and those about the king were Lannister allies. The commander of the City Watch is a corrupt man. Jon had thought to act when the queen was at Casterly Rock, or when the Red Cloaks were distracted, but on the morning Stannis and I were to see him, he fell ill, and by night he was dead. Maester Luwin's face went pale. But half the Lannisters were gone when he died, so how could they have murdered him? The city is not only Lannisters, Arthur said. There are many who will not see Jon's inquiries go forward. Master Pycelle, who tended him, declared Lord Jon sick. I think Pycelle lied. Luwin started as if the oath of the masters had been struck. Maesters take vows. Not all masters are true to them, Ned said quietly. So if Pycelle is false, we are in worse danger. Stannis has returned to Dragonstone. He is furious Robert offered me the hand rather than him. What of Varys, Petter Baelish, Renly? Maester Luwin asked. We do not know where their loyalties lie. Catelyn turned to Ned. Ned, King's Landing is a lion's den. It is too dangerous. You should refuse. Ned shook his head. Now that I know, I cannot stand by. Arthur looked up. Uncle, the South is the Lannisters' sphere. Lord Jon served his hand for 15 years and was killed. If you go south expecting justice, you risk the same fate. For a long beat, Ned beheld them all. Arthur's confidence had grown as he spoke. You came tonight not just to tell us, Maester Luwin said. You came with a plan? Arthur's mouth curved. Robert brought most of his court here to the north, and with them the Lannisters. Now the lions have walked into the wolf's den. Ned's voice was flat. We have no proof of the queen and her brother. Arthur's eyes were steady. We do not need proof. Chapter 263, The Bastard Prince, 2-in-1. Winterfell, the main keep, the sewing room. During Septa Mordaine's lesson, Arya fumbled with her needle and sighed as she stared at the mess she had embroidered, unable to tell what it was supposed to be. She had been determined to sew a snowflake peach tapestry with her own hands, something she could trade to her cousin Arthur for one of his dragon crystal swords. After seeing Arthur's trick making dawn glow yesterday, she couldn't get it out of her head. She'd changed her clothes and slipped back to find her room empty. Finally, she'd found the others in the armory, watching Uncle Benjen test a sword. The dragon crystal sword had dazzled her. Arthur had boasted he had 70 of them, each a masterpiece, and that they might even stand against the others from old Nan's tales. The swords became all the more precious to her when she learned Arthur planned to give them to the Night's Watch. If she hadn't lost that bet with Arthur, with her relationship to him, she could have gotten one. So she decided to trade a tapestry for a sword. Now looking at the lumpy thing on her lap, Arya's cheeks burned. She prodded and poked, trying to fix it, then sighed and set it aside. Earlier her lady mother had asked Septa Mordain about needlework, and the Septa had praised Sansa without hesitation. Sansa's hands are so neat and nimble. What she makes is as lovely as she is. But when it came to Arya, she had sniffed. Arya's hands are no better than a blacksmith's. Perhaps I should go to the smith and have a sword made for myself, Arya thought, glancing around as if afraid the Septa might read her mind. The Septa's attention, however, was all on Princess Myrcella. Septa Mordain sat beside the girl, her face bright with smiles at the honor of instructing a princess. Sansa sewed with practiced fingers, chatting happily, and Beth Castle, the master-at-arms' daughter, sat beside her, drinking in every word. Jane Poole leaned in and whispered something, and Arya, curious, asked, "What are you talking about?" Jane startled, then giggled. Sansa reddened a little, and Beth's face went all pink. No one answered at first. "Tell me," Arya insisted. Jane peered around to make sure Septa Mordain didn't hear, and then, as Myrcella said something that made the Septa and the other ladies laugh, Sansa lowered her voice. "We were talking about the prince." Arya knew exactly which prince that meant. Who else but tall, handsome Joffrey? At the feast Sansa had been seated near him. Arya had been stuck beside a chubby boy. "Joffrey likes your sister," Jane whispered with as much pride as if she'd arranged it herself. "He told her she was pretty. One day he'll marry her," little Beth said in a dreamy voice, hugging her knees. "Then Sansa will be queen of the whole world." Sansa blushed and tried to sound modest. She turned to Arya. "What do you think of Prince Joffrey? He's very brave, don't you agree?" "Jon Snow says he looks like a girl," Arya replied. "Arthur says a prince is no different from anyone else. He has a nose and eyes, a head on his shoulders, and he'll cry for his mother if he's hurt." Sansa sighed and went back to her sewing. "Poor Jon Snow. As a bastard, he's bound to be jealous. And Arthur is teasing you, my sister. No one would dare hit a prince. He's taller than Robb already, and in a few years even your cousin might not match him." "Jon Snow is our brother," Arya snapped. "Arthur said he hanged a prince in the Red Mountains." Her voice carried too far. Septa Mordane looked up, her thin mouth closing like a seam. "Children, what are you saying?" The Septa's face was sharp and frowning, born for scolds. Sansa corrected Arya more gently in front of her. "Half-brother, when Joffrey inherits the throne, even your cousin will have to bend the knee." She smiled at the Septa. "Arya and I were just saying how glad we are to have the princess with us today." Septa Mordane inclined her head. "Indeed, it is a great honor." Princess Myrcella smiled shyly. "Arya, why aren't you sewing?" The Septa rose and rustled over in her starched skirts. "Let me see your work." Arya wanted to scream. It was Sansa's fault, she thought, for drawing the Septa over. Reluctantly, she handed over her tapestry. Septa Mordane examined it and sniffed. "Arya, Arya, Arya," she said, "this will not do. You're hopeless." Everyone was looking at her. Sansa kept her manners and didn't laugh, but Jine snickered, and even Princess Myrcella looked pitying. Tears rose hot behind Arya's eyes. She jumped up and ran for the door. "Arya, come back! Take another step," Septa Mordane called. "I'll tell your lady mother about this. To sew such a thing in front of a princess is a disgrace." Arya stopped at the door, biting her lip, tears already falling. She made a small curtsy to Myrcella. "Princess, forgive me." Myrcella blinked and looked to the ladies beside her, unsure what to do. Septa Mordane's voice was stern. "Arya, where are you going?" Arya glared back and answered boldly, "I'm going to help shoe the horses and forge a proper longsword." Her brazen lie brought a flash of surprise to the Septa's face. Arya turned and fled down the stairs as fast as she could. In the guardroom at the bottom, Nymeria, her direwolf, waited. The wolf sprang up the moment Arya appeared. She smiled. If no one else loved her, Nymeria always did. The two were inseparable. Nymeria slept at the foot of her bed. If her mother hadn't forbidden it, Arya would have brought the direwolf into the sewing room and seen if Septa Mordane dared to scold her again. She unfastened Nymeria, who licked her hand with eager yellow eyes that shone like coins. Septa Mordane had almost certainly sent someone to fetch Lady Catelyn, and Arya didn't want to be caught. She had a better plan. The boys were practicing sparring in the yard. She wanted to watch Robb thrash Prince Joffrey, black and blue. "Come on," she whispered to Nymeria, and they ran. There was a window on the covered bridge between the keep and the armory that looked down on the training yard. That was where she headed. When she reached the window, she was panting. Two figures already stood there. A cold wind carried snippets of their conversation. "Jon Snow, the Night's Watch has noble vows, but you deserve a larger stage. Do you remember what I joked in the Peach Garden Tower? If Riverrun can aim for the Iron Throne, so can Jon Snow, but you cannot do this alone. Come help me." "That's your endeavor, not mine," another voice answered stubbornly. "I have my own. I want to be Lord Commander of the Wall." Arya recognized Jon Snow by his stance, leaning at the window, face grave. From her side, she could only see the tall back of the other man and the greatsword dawn across his shoulder. It had to be her cousin Arthur. They were watching the sparring below and didn't notice her until Jon's direwolf, Ghost, rose and padded toward them. Nymeria sniffed cautiously. Ghost, already taller, nosed her and gave a gentle nibble on the ear before returning to his place. Jon eyed Arya. "Shouldn't you be in sewing class?" Arya made a face. "I want to watch them fight." "Then come on over." He laughed and ruffled her hair. Arya flushed. Jon had always made her feel safe. Of all the children, Arya and Jon took after their father most. Robb, Sansa, and Bran looked more like Tullys. Arthur turned and gave her a casual look. "If you ask me, Dornish schooling would suit you better. In Dorne, noble children your age play all day in the pools of the water gardens." "All day?" Arya climbed onto the windowsill, ignoring the practical part of his remark and leaning forward. "They don't have to do sewing?" She seated herself between them. The clamor from the yard came up, clumsy wooden swords and grunts rather than true steel. Arthur went on, "I'm not talking about your direwolf. I'm speaking of Name, my lover. Her father told her once, There is enough sorrow in the world. Better to find your joy than force yourself into things you cannot do well. When I met her, she carried a dozen weapons, and I've never seen her pick up a needle since." John looked surprised. "You have a lover?" "And a daughter," Arthur added, a small smile at the corner of his mouth. "Ashara. She has violet eyes like mine. My undertaking doesn't mean I cannot marry or have children." Arya's interest in Dorne was high, but the yard disappointed. Only a few younger boys were sparring. Bran was all bulky armor and felt tied to his padding. Prince Tommen, already round, looked even plumper with his kit. They rattled dull practice blows under Sir Roderick's watchful eye. A dozen onlookers cheered. Robb shouted the loudest. Theon Greyjoy stood beside him in a black doublet, kraken embroidered on his breast, a mocking sneer on his face. The two boys in the ring were clumsy and tired. Arya guessed they'd been at it for some time. "This is probably more tiring than sewing," John said after Arthur had told him about Ashara. "But it's more fun." Arya shot back. "But it's better than sewing." John grinned and tousled her hair again. She asked, "Why aren't you two down there?" "Bastards aren't allowed to spar with princes," John said, a faint smile on his mouth. "Even for practice, only those born true may hit princes." "Oh," Arya felt stung. She should have remembered. She turned to Arthur. "Why don't you go down?" Arthur frowned as if the idea amused and irritated him both. If Jon and Joffrey shed their titles, then Jon's point still stood. Bastards were kept from princes. Arthur yawned and said, "I've been in too many fights the past years. It's a pain coming back to Winterfell. I want rest. No one in that yard interests me." "Not even the Hound, who's taller than you, standing next to Joffrey?" Arya asked, curious. Arthur didn't answer. Arya watched as Robb shouted encouragement and Bran and Tommen stumbled on. Jon reached out, took her hand, felt the thinness of her arm, and shook his head. "You're too slight, Arya. I don't think you could even lift a half-sword, let alone dawn, let alone wield it in battle." Arya jerked her hand away and glared at him. Then Arthur said quietly, "Arya, you're not fit for the clumsy, bone-breaking steel dance of the knights. But in Braavos, they use the assassin's dance, the water dance. It's swift, light, and unpredictable. That would suit you." Her eyes brightened at the words assassin's dance. "Water dance. What is that? Is it strong?" "Words are cheap. I'll go down and show you." Arthur hopped lightly over the windowsill. Watch closely. Chapter 264, Hunting, 2-in-1. In the training yard, Prince Joffrey lay sprawled in the churned dust, rolled into a tangle of leather and plate like an overturned turtle flailing for purchase. He tried to rise but lacked the strength. The pile of armor straps made every movement awkward. Bran stood over him, a wooden sword raised, ready to strike again the moment Joffrey regained his feet. "Stop!" Sir Roderick bellowed, hauling Joffrey up and steadying him. "Well done." Lewis, Donis, helped them out of their armor. He looked around. "Prince Joffrey, Robb, would you like another round?" Robb, still damp with sweat from the last bout, stepped forward eagerly. "Gladly." Joffrey emerged from the shadow of the tower with a bored expression. "Sir Roderick, this is child's play." Theon Greyjoy snorted. "You two are children indeed." "I don't know about Robb," Joffrey said, "but I am the crown prince. I don't want to play with wooden toys with a Stark." "You've been hit more times than you've swung," Robb said. "Are you scared?" Joffrey's face showed nothing. "Oh dear, how terrifying. Our great warrior has spoken." The Lannister men laughed. Sir Roderick twirled his white beard and asked the prince, "Then what do you propose?" "I want to fight with real steel." "No," Sir Roderick answered at once. "Using real swords is too dangerous. I'll only allow blunted tourney blades." Joffrey did not reply. Sandor Clegane, the Hound, shoved aside the bystanders, his broad frame cutting off the prince's escape. "Sir," he growled, "this is your crown prince. Who are you to tell him what he can and cannot use?" "I am the master-at-arms of Winterfell. You would do well to remember that," Roderick snapped. The Hound's burned face curled into a mocking grin. "Do you only train girls here?" The Lannister retinue laughed anew. Before Sir Roderick could answer, a quiet voice from the edge of the yard cut through the noise. "Clegane, draw your sword. I'll show you whether this place only trains girls." Arthur stepped through the crowd to the center, eyes violet and steady. The Hound's swagger dropped away. Something like respect, or at least concentration, flashed in his gaze as his hand went to the longsword at his hip. "Don't make a fuss," Sir Roderick murmured into Arthur's ear, then said aloud, Prince Joffrey, I still think it best you and Robb use blunted swords. If I fight, it will be with steel. I don't want to waste time with children, Joffrey pouted. He jabbed at Arthur with a sneer. Good dog. Since Arthur has challenged you, don't disappoint him. Sir Roderick tried to persuade them, but Arthur drew his blade without further words. A slender rapier flashed at his hip, azure wave, and in a voice that brooked no argument he ordered, Everyone else, step back. Reluctantly, Sir Roderick had the yard cleared. Arthur turned, sword in one hand, and assumed a water dance stance. Sandor Clegane refused the iron-bound shield proffered by one of the Lannister men, pulling his dog-headed helm down. In full stride he charged, longsword held high, a smoking column of gray steel and muscle. Arthur stood his ground. Sandor's great blade came down in a heavy diagonal strike. Arthur did not retreat, he slid aside. The edge barely kissed the cloth of his sleeve. With the lightness of mist on wind, he glided to Sandor's left and thrust. It was not a slash, but a precise needle of a thrust that found the gap between wrist and pauldron, drawing a thin line of red. Sandor howled and spun, sweeping his sword in a wide arc. He clipped nothing but air and the after image of Arthur, who had already flowed to the hound's rear and brought the flat of his rapier down hard on the left leg. Too slow, Arthur murmured. Before Sandor could recover, Arthur bounded clear and even had the time to taunt. Ah! The hound's eyes were bloodshot under the helm. He roared and launched himself again, his longsword a hurricane of steel. Each strike could have split a man in two. But Arthur moved like water around stone. When the blade fell, he slipped aside. When a sweep came, he arched back. When a thrust attacked, he spun through it. Every evasive step was answered with a quick, precise riposte from the rapier, finding joints and gaps, cuffs, armpits, the back of the knee. Small red marks bloomed along the edges of armor, shallow wounds, enough to sting, enough to force claymore-sized swings to be guarded. The hound's being toyed with, someone whispered. Arthur's practically dancing. Another said, Look, the hound got hit again. Robb watched in stunned silence. What style is that? He asked Sir Roderick. Sir Roderick stroked his beard and watched Arthur's fluid motions for a long beat before answering. Water dance. A bravosi art. Not the wide, forceful blows of a knight. It favors agility, unpredictability, and lethal precision. They traded blows and parries for a quarter of an hour. At last, Arthur's rapier knocked the dog-headed helm free. Sandor's burned face was revealed, sweat and blood matting the hair and dripping from his chin. He was breathing hard, chest rising violently. When he roared again, it sounded hoarse and thin. His legs shook. He was barely holding himself upright. That's enough. You both fought well, Sir Roderick called at last. Luis, Donis, strip Clegane and take him to Maester Luwin. Joffrey protested hotly. The dog didn't fall. He hasn't lost. Arthur wiped the blade clean with a cloth. Your Highness, if you don't want your hound to become a dead dog, you do well to listen to Sir Roderick. It is not fitting for a crown prince to fence with steel, though there will be other chances. He nodded to the master-at-arms and walked toward the tower armory. Arya came running down the path with her direwolf at her heels. I want to learn the water dance, she cried, eyes bright. Cousin, you must teach me. Jon, who followed her, grinned and then put on a mock-serious face. Little sister, you'd best go back to your room. Septa Mordain will be waiting to teach you a lesson. The longer you hide, the worse it will be. She might make you knit for a whole winter. When the ice melts and spring comes, we'll find you with the needle still in your frozen hand. Arya shivered reflexively. This world is too unfair, she complained. Sandor was tended by Maester Luwin and fell into a coma from blood loss. Luwin assured them that a dog's life was tenacious and he would recover fully with a month of rest. But Joffrey's mother, Cersei, incensed, went straight to the king demanding justice. Robert waved her off. Woman, he said, this was a contest in the public yard, not one of your courtly dances. Injuries happen. After some arguing that left Cersei steaming and sent away, Robert turned to Eddard. When can your Wolfswood hunt be arranged? I'm fed up with her nagging. She's spoiled Joffrey so he's no man. Kids from both houses training together would bring them closer. They'll learn to be like brothers. Winning and losing is normal, but that woman... Eddard replied, I've sent word to House Glover at Deepwood Motte. They'll send their best hunters and archers to drive the game from the northwest. Robert Glover said he's found tracks of boar and even black bears in the Wolf's Wood. If everything goes quickly, it can be ready in a week. If slower, then before the party rides south. Robert's eyes brightened. Good. Rob and Joffrey, you and I, a proper hunt together. It takes teamwork. They'll become close, trust me. Eddard forced a smile. I miss when we were young wards at the Eyrie with John. Robert sipped wine and sighed. So do I, but we can't go back. John's gone. The Seven know how much I respected that old man. A week later, the hunting party rode out at dawn through the Hunter's Gate. Arthur counted the company accompanying the king, roughly 200 Southerners, more than half of Robert's retinue. Southerners rarely hunted in the north, and to keep Joffrey safe, especially with Sandor incapacitated, Queen Cersei had sent extra guards for her son. Tyrion, Arthur heard at his side. The dwarf rode close by on a strange little mare. I hear you gave my nephew's dog a right beating? Thanks for that, Tyrion said dryly. Without a vicious dog backing him up, the master is quieter. Not necessary, Arthur waved. I was showing Arya the water dance. Clegane was a practice target, suitably big for the lesson. Tyrion grinned. I'm sure Arya is delighted. What are we hunting? I heard boar, bear, moose, even shadow cats? Arthur blinked. Anything, right, so long as there's plenty to eat afterward. They rode on toward the Peach Garden estate in the Wolf's Wood. There they found 200 Winterfell guards and over 150 hunters, archers, and beaters from House Glover of Deepwood Motte already assembled. Tyrion's eyes widened at the orchard and the size of the force. You've prepared an army. The beasts don't stand a chance. Bear meat for supper, Penrose said, swallowing. Arthur was less interested in the scenery than in the front of the company. His uncle Eddard and King Robert were already on the tower. The men dismounted and tended their horses. Many gathered at the outdoor fires to warm themselves or pushed into the great hall. Arthur warmed his hands at a fire and watched as Robert emerged from the tower, his face grim. Eddard followed and nodded to Arthur. Moments later, the king's voice thundered across the courtyard. Until I return, no one is to leave this place a single step. Disobeying will be treated as treason. A murmur rose among the men as northern archers appeared on the tower. Joffrey looked puzzled. Father, what's happened? Wait here for me, Robert said, mounting his destrier. He turned to the Kingsguard. Meryn Trant, Boros Blount, you are charged with the prince's safety. Keep him within sight. Barristan, Arthur, come with me. Arthur felt Penrose hand him his horse. Tyrion's face tightened. He seemed to understand the change in mood. Arthur rode with the king, Eddard, and Barristan out of the yard, galloping hard toward Winterfell proper. As they rode, Robert asked, Arthur, is everything Ned told me true? Everything he said is true, your grace, Arthur replied. I swear on my sword. The hand, Eddard, told Stannis and me he had proof that the king's supposed 3 true-born children are not yours. He found evidence that they were fathered by Queen Cersei's brother, Jaime Lannister. Ned planned to confront you after the queen left in the next few days, but he fell ill the day before. Eddard spoke carefully. Catelyn and I received a letter from Lysa. She claimed Jon Arryn was murdered, that he was killed because of what he'd discovered about the queen. Barristan, hearing the accusation now made plain, stared as if he'd been struck. His horse shied as he murmured, This is grave. Robert's face drained. He understood now why Lysa had fled back to the Eyrie so soon after he mentioned sending her son away. Why Stannis had returned to Dragonstone in silence when Ned had announced his choice for Hand. Are you sure they would dare such a thing while we are north? He asked. Arthur answered steadily. Since the royal party came north from King's Landing, the queen has kept mostly to herself, and with so many eyes around, she dared not overstep. But now most of Winterfell and your party are away in the woods. The conditions are right. They have been traveling together for months, and the motive would be there. If your grace sees them with your own eyes, you will have proof we can all act on. Winterfell's keep was a squat circular fortress, its oldest stones topped with weathered gargoyles. Beside it stood the broken tower, once the castle's highest watchtower. Lightning years ago had split it and set its top collapsing inward. Crows nested in the ruin now, though none were to be seen. A huge bald eagle, almost unnaturally alert, perched atop the broken ruin, and watched the abandoned room high in the old keep with a human intelligence in its sharp eyes. Through the window, the pale, artificial light of late morning crept in. Arthur blinked back to himself. They had already returned to Winterfell. They stood now in the guardroom near the keep. A great fire roared in the hearth, yet the faces gathered there were chilled with unease. "Where have the Queen and the Kingslayer gone?" King Robert demanded. His mood was as stormy as his features as he beckoned a trembling maid forward. She dropped to her knees and stammered, "Yes, Your Majesty." After breakfast, the Queen said she was bored and went to the Godswood with Sir Jaime. "They're in the keep," Arthur supplied. Eddard drew the guards close. "The keep is long unused. Few go there. Robert." "Let's go," the king said flatly. At Eddard's command, the Winterfell guards moved like a silent pack, sealing the keep's entrances. Arthur followed Robert up the stout old stair, noting the first floor had been kept in fair order. Higher up there were fallen stones, nests of rats and thick webs. On the top floor, a faint, unmistakable sound came through the empty halls. It was the sound of flesh colliding. Everyone there was an adult. They knew what it meant. Robert, flushed from drink and now crimson with something hotter, lurched forward ahead of the others and shoved them aside. Arthur almost lost his footing, then steadied and followed. As he reached the corridor, the Queen's sudden, high scream and Robert's booming curses burst into the open. The door was thrown wide. Robert and Jaime were a twisted heap on the floor, grappling. Barristan and Eddard strained to separate them. Jaime's white cloak and gold plate lay cast aside. Beneath, his forehead and brow were bloodied, his nose askew. Cersei stood disordered, her face swollen, a hand covering it, terror and a hard, cold composure warring on her lips. The hurried footsteps had given the lovers a scant moment to dress, but not much. The room turned to chaos. "Seize the Kingslayer," someone barked. Arthur's shout to the stunned guards at the threshold broke the melee. With effort, they pulled the two men apart and bound Jaime. Robert's face was a bruise of rage. A great chunk of beard on his chin had been torn free. He panted a curse. The drunken bile in his voice turned to pure, red hatred. "You both deserve to burn in the seven hells." Jaime, spitting blood and a fragment of tooth, hissed, "Robert, don't make a spectacle of this. You never loved her, and she never loved you." Cersei, regaining her cool, smiled a cutting smile. "We'll be waiting for you in the seven hells. I'll hang your heads on the gates of King's Landing. Not one of your bastards will live," Robert roared. Eddard held him back with a sweating effort. "The Queen's treason with her brother is without pardon, but the 3 children are innocent." "The bastards must die," Robert snarled. "That is the King's command." Eddard's voice was heavy as he answered, "Then you must do it yourself. The man who passes the sentence must swing the sword. If you are to take those children's lives, you should look into their eyes and hear their last words. If you cannot do that, perhaps they do not deserve to die." The king stared, stunned by the force of Eddard's words. Arthur stepped in. "Now is not the time for debate, Your Majesty. The Lannister guards in the Peach Garden and within the city must be dealt with. Lord Tywin still sits at Casterly Rock." Eddard recovered his command. "Arthur, go to the Peach Garden in the Wolfswood. Secure the Lannister guards. I will handle things here." Robert found purchase on reason in his anger. "Barristan, you and Arthur go to the Peach Garden. Announce the Queen's crimes. Kill any who resist. Bring the prince back." "As you command, Your Majesty," Barristan replied. They were in the saddle again before the town clocks could toll. The Peach Garden was tense when they arrived. Lannister men clustered about the prince. Barristan bellowed into the courtyard. "By royal decree, Cersei Lannister and Sir Jaime Lannister are arrested for treason and incest. Disarm and surrender. Any who resist will be cut down." For a long breath, the Lannister guards only stared at one another, hands on hilts. Joffrey went pale enough to be nearly clear. "Impossible," he muttered. Seeing no surrender, Arthur drew Dawn with a slow, clean motion and spoke for Winterfell in a voice that carried. "Men of Winterfell, hear me. I will count to 7. Any who still hold their swords when I reach 7 will be killed." 1. He counted clear and steady. The Winterfell men in the courtyard drew their blades. Archers on the towers knocked arrows. By 3, a number of hired knights and free riders declared their independence of House Lannister and stepped aside. By 6, several Lannister men, more frightened than righteous, dropped their swords with a clatter. Only a few stubborn ones needed to be dealt with by Jory and his men. They fell fast. Barristan took custody of Joffrey, stupefied and white-faced. In the end, 214 Lannister retainers were captured. The remainder, free riders and hired knights, were released once their allegiance had been verified. When the dust settled and the prisoners were set, a hush fell over Robb, Sansa, and most of the others who had followed the events back to Winterfell. Benjen, cloaked in the black of the Night's Watch, asked in a voice that refused to hide the shock, "Does this mean the king's children are bastards born of incest?" Maester Luwin's ravens had already flown. "I have sent ravens to King's Landing and the Great Keeps, announcing the king's decree and proclaiming the crimes of the queen and Sir Jaime," he said. In the king's guest chambers, Jory reported the figures to Eddard and the council. "Most of the Lannister guards are taken, 214. The Imp and the Hound are missing." Robert waved the missing men away with a scornful hand. "Compared to Tywin, Tyrion and Clegane are nothing. Issue warrants. Let them go." Eddard warned, "Lord Tywin will not sit idle. We should prepare for rebellion." Renly echoed the caution. "This will draw war with the Westerlands." Robert's jaw set. "After those 2 dogs are executed, Eddard, summon the northern banners. Renly and I will take men south to King's Landing. Just as we broke Pike, we will crush the rebellion in the Westerlands, and—" he banged a fist lightly on the table, the old boast rattling free, "smash Casterly Rock." Arthur listened to plans of levies and alliances. House Martell would do as it always did, watch for advantage. The Tyrells would see a chance to press their claim in the court. With Robert's children declared illegitimate, Stannis became heir, and duty would draw him when called, even if unwillingly. Theon Greyjoy remained a captive in Winterfell. With the wolf, the stag, the falcon, and the fish aligned, Tywin faced far worse odds than in many other reckonings. Eddard leaned forward to remind them of another threat. "Benjen says a king beyond the wall, Mance Rayder, has gathered the wildlings. The Night's Watch is stretched thin." Robert waved his hand, and a history lesson. "The walls stood for 8,000 years. It can hold for a year or 2 more. We'll deal with Tywin first." The meeting fractured. Arthur left the king's chamber with his uncle. He told Eddard quietly that the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch had invited him north to help select a site for a new lookout for the Peach Gardens men. An odd courtesy, perhaps, but one Eddard accepted with a tired nod. Eddard's line softened. "Winter is coming," he said. "If not for this, I would lead troops north. The Stark's duty is the north." Arthur kept his thoughts to himself. The others, the cold thing beyond the wall, weighed more heavily on him than any Lannister claim. That afternoon, the hunting party returned to Winterfell empty-handed. The gate guards told Arthur that all Lannister men within the city had been cleared out and taken, and for a moment he allowed himself relief. The planned use of the hunt to gather men and seize initiative had worked. At the dining hall, the household tried to settle. Sansa poked at her bread. "Prince Joffrey is so handsome and brave," she said, distracted. "How could he be their child?" Arya gobbled a boiled egg and grinned. "I heard the king's going to tell everyone Joffrey isn't his. The prince is a bastard." Finally, some fairness. Sansa's worry flared. "Then, by the betrothal, am I to marry a bastard?" Catelyn soothed her. "The queen deceived the king. The betrothal is void. We will not allow you to marry Joffrey." Bran's small voice fell over the table like a pebble in a pool. "Will Tommen be killed by the king? Will Princess Myrcella die too?" His eyes were wide and innocent in their concern. "I hope they don't die." Robb came in from outside and closed that door. "They won't die. The king has ordered only that it be proclaimed that Cersei's 3 children are not his but born of incest, and that Cersei and Jaime will be executed tomorrow. No other commands." Jon and Theon, who had been with Robb securing the prisoners, followed him inside. In the guest chambers, Jory added his report to the tally. Except for Tyrion and Sandor, most of the Lannister men were taken, 214. The rest were released after ID. Robert's answer was simple. "Worse men than that have escaped. Let them go for now." Maester Luwin's ravens were already on their way. Eddard and the council knew what came next, a storm of politics and war. Plans were laid, banners to be called, messengers to ride. The name Tywin Lannister hung like a dark cloud. Before the tumult swallowed all else, Arthur went to his quarters. Jon sat staring into the dying embers of the fire. Because of his status as a bastard, Jon had not been allowed to join the hunt. He had stayed in Winterfell, idle and restless. "I never thought in a day Joffrey could go from prince to bastard," Jon said with a sigh. "The gods can be cruel." Arthur clapped him on the shoulder, half in jest. "Now you're qualified to spar with him." Jon shook his head and smiled. "I don't want to spar with a lordling." He was quieter after a breath. "I am going north," he said, "to the Night's Watch. For that I want to make a gift for my sister. Will you help?" Arthur saw the resolve in Jon's face. There was no talking him out of it. "Do you want a needle like the one I gave you?" he asked. "You always guess what I'm thinking," Jon answered. "Arya will love needle." Arthur closed his eyes a moment, then opened them with the easy certainty of a promise. "Then she shall have one." The damp wind of the dungeons smelled of rot as it bit at their faces. The three guards huddled around a brazier for warmth. The flames threw dancing shadows across their rough features. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor, and the men started, looking up in unison. "Who's there?" The lead guard shoved himself to his feet, his hand already on his sword hilt. Sparks hissed from the charcoal. "The king!" A broad figure stepped out of the gloom. Moonlight mixed with the brazier's glow to show King Robert's face flushed with wine. Snow still clung to his sable cloak, melting as he moved. Behind him, the king's guard in white cloaks and bright helms followed, their armor sharp against the winter night. "Your Grace," the guards bowed hastily, then flinched at the smell of the wine on him. "Lead the way," one of the king's guard said. "The king wishes to see Queen Cersei and the Kingslayer." An older guard hesitated. "As you command, Your Grace, but it's filthy down there, and the cold." "Open it," Robert snapped. A key turned in the heavy lock. The guard lit an oil lamp and led them deeper into the cells. Dampness clung to the stones. The lamp's flame guttered in the cold, throwing the prisoners' shadows into grotesque shapes. Chains clinked somewhere. Rats scurried in the walls. Important prisoners were held in separate cells. The guard pointed to two adjacent doors near the end of the row. Those two. Robert drew his cloak tighter against the chill, the drink sobering him only a little. "Give him the keys," he told the king's guard beside him. "Then go." Without question, the guard handed the keys over. The creak of the cell door woke Cersei. She had been curled on a pile of mildewed straw. Her golden hair was a tangled, filthy mat, and the scarlet of her gown had long since faded. When she lifted her head and saw the king there, fear flared in her eyes, then hardened into disdain. "Bitch," Robert spat. Cersei's voice was cold. "What are you doing here? Do you think I'll kneel and beg a crude, drunken fool like you for mercy?" "I've come to grant your wish." Robert's expression was flat, his mouth pulling into a grin that did not reach his eyes. "Come, you don't want to spend your last moments alone, do you?" Half incredulous, half hopeful, Cersei stepped from her straw and followed as Robert and the Kingsguard opened the next cell. Jaime sat slumped on a pallet. His shirt was stained with dried blood, and his face still puffed with bruises. His hands were shackled. Robert watched them both, the two of them so like and yet so far apart. "Kingslayer," he said, "I remember you once telling me how King Aerys had Lord Rickard Stark and his son Brandon put to death." Jaime said nothing. Robert spoke for him. "Aerys wrapped the old man in fire and put a sword before the son. He said if the son could not save his father, the roasting would continue." Jaime's pupils tightened. His Adam's apple bobbed. "What is it you want?" he asked softly. Cersei felt something colder than the dungeon wind crawl up her spine. "Don't be afraid," Robert said, almost jovial. "I'm not as mad and cruel as Aerys." He looked at the two of them. "You and that bitch have both betrayed me. Death would be too simple a punishment." He leaned in, the king's breath heavy with wine. "Before I take you to the execution grounds, I will give you a choice. If you will kill her now, the heads of the 3 bastards you sired with her will not be put on the city gates. If you refuse, on the way to the execution ground, you will see them on spikes for all King's Landing to spit at." Jaime's eyes went red. "Eddard Stark will not stand for this," he said. "I am the king," Robert said darkly. "I will have them beheaded myself if I must." Cersei cursed. "You will burn in the 7 hells for this." "Kingslayers go to the 7 hells," Robert sneered. He straightened and turned away, signaling the Kingsguard to lock the cell again. When the footsteps faded and the iron bolted home, silence fell heavy, except for Cersei's low sobs and the stifled, ragged breaths of the two prisoners. Cersei's mind went back to the hag's words from her childhood, the prophecy she had tried to twist to mean someone else. One day, drowned in tears, the Valonqar will wrap his hands around your pale white throat and choke the life from you. She had always thought the Valonqar meant Tyrion. In the dark of the dungeon, the prophecy narrowed into a single, unbearable truth. She turned pleading eyes to Jaime. "Kiss me, Jaime," she whispered. "Kill me, Jaime," she begged another way. If he would do this, at least he could save the three children. His face was a mask. His fingers found her neck, fingers that had once touched her with love and want, and now moved like a man's who had rehearsed this act in the space between honor and mercy. They closed. The pressure increased slowly. Cersei's hands scrabbled, then smoothed helplessly over Jaime's forearm. A warm drop splashed against her cheek. "Look, what I have done for love," he said, the words a hollow thing in that locked room. The sound of life slipping away in a body is small. The last thing Cersei felt was the giving of breath and the warmth of those tears on her face. Dawn came to Winterfell. The air in the north bit harder, and more people were coming into the town. Kingsguard led Jaime from his cell like a man who had already been sentenced in his own head. He glanced up as he passed through the gate. No spikes, no heads crowned with golden hair. For a moment, a flicker of life returned to him. The road to the execution square was packed. Faces pressed forward, spittle and curses rained down, but they did not reach him. In his mind, he could hear the white book already, turning over the page of his life. Sir Jaime of House Lannister, eldest son of Lord Tywin Lannister and Lady Joanna. As a youth, he had served as a squire to Lord Sumner Crakehall, rode with him against the Kingswood Brotherhood, and at 15 had been knighted by Sir Arthur Dayne for bravery. The same year, he was chosen for the Kingsguard by King Aerys II. In the sack of King's Landing, he had slain that mad king beneath the Iron Throne, and for that deed had been dubbed the Kingslayer. Pardoned by Robert Baratheon, he had escorted his sister to King's Landing when she married the king and had won the tourney at the wedding. Found with her in the old castle of Winterfell, he had been arrested for their fornication. In the dungeons, he had strangled his sister to save the children and was now to be executed by the king's justice. Sir Jaime walked up the steps to the block without stumbling. "Sir Jaime Lannister," a herald called, "have you any last words?" Eddard Stark's voice, the hard, contemptuous voice that had once ordered him to kneel, echoed in his mind. Jaime moistened his cracked lips. He thought of Arthur Dayne and of a pale, sleepless sword called Dawn. "I would ask that Sir Arthur may be the one to behead me with Dawn," he said. "I was honored to be knighted by him, if I may be honored to be done by his blade." There was no Arthur Dayne at hand, no Dawn upon the block. There was only the cold timber and a long sword drawn with a crisp, metallic whisper. The boy who had once wanted to be Arthur Dayne had become something else, the smiling knight, the man who had chosen between impossible loyalties. The sword flashed, a head rolled and settled in the snow. Blood spattered the white like a red flower opening. On the day the Kingslayer was beheaded, the king rode south along the King's Road with Renly and the Kingsguard, taking what was left of their force. Outside the gates of Winterfell, the queen's great wheeled palace waited like a luxury carriage fallen quiet. Eddard, now hand of the king, set about summoning his vassals and gathering supplies for the march. Arthur spent a little time forging a small sewing needle for Arya. Then, after bidding farewell to the people of Winterfell, he and a dozen or so guards climbed into the wagons. Benjen and several other men of the Night's Watch rode with them north toward the wall. At first, the road north from Winterfell was broad. Gradually, as they pushed farther away, the track narrowed until it felt more like a forest path than a highway. To the west, low, rugged gray hills rose, crowned here and there by watchtowers. To the east, the land lay flat and open, plains stretching to a pale horizon. Stone bridges crossed some narrow, rushing streams. Farmsteads clustered where people still lived. There was more traffic on the road than Arthur had expected, and when night fell, they huddled in an inn. It's easy to find one this close to Winterfell, Benjen said as he filled a cup of rye ale for Arthur. Further north, the folk thin right out, and the road grows harder and lonelier. Don't worry about me, Arthur said, taking the cup and smiling. When I campaigned against the wildlings in the Red Mountains, I slept rough as often as not. After the heat and insects of those hills, northern cold is almost refreshing. Benjen sipped from a horn cup. What did they call that song praising your deeds? He asked. The 7 Conquests of Dawn, replied Arthur's squire, Penrose. Benjen nodded and then rose to return to the long table, where Jon was sitting among the black-clad brothers, and a small gray wolf gnawed at a meaty bone at his feet. The former crown prince, now Joffrey Hill, sat at the end of the table in a dark cloak, head bowed, looking out of place among the rough laughter and warm hearth. Penrose broke off half a loaf of black bread and dipped it in the innkeeper's stew of corned beef, turnips, carrots, and barley. I never imagined Prince Joffrey would be a bastard, he said, shaking his head. I still remember the tourney for his naming day. Now he must take the black, swear never to marry or father children. Arthur said nothing. Joffrey's joining the Night's Watch had been the compromise Eddard and the king struck to save the boy's life. It ended the engagement to Sansa and left Myrcella and Tommen as hostages in Winterfell. The rest of the road matched Benjen's warnings. 3 days out, the tilled fields gave way to dense wood, and the King's Road thinned until it might have been mist. The hills on the left grew steeper and greener, then darker and bluer. By the 5th day they were mountains, shoulders of ancient rock streaked with old snow. When the north wind rose, it sent needles of ice down the ridges like frozen banners. The King's Road wound northeast through the wolfswood, oak, evergreen, blackthorn, while wolves answered one another at night and horses stamped and whinnied. They took turns watching. At a dilapidated wooden manor on a blustery night, they found Yoren of the Watch, a grim, hunchbacked man with sour breath and stringy hair, and 2 peasant boys who had chosen the black rather than the lash of a lord or the knife of a maester. Arthur liked Yoren at once. The men you've brought make my work easy, the recruiter said, roasting by the fire. Enough for me to fill my quota for 2 or 3 years. Yoren was one of the Watch's ravens, a recruiter who rode the road year-round. As they pushed farther north, the temperature fell steadily. Farmsteads became few, then none. Penrose, Ballanshewin, and the other retainers, never before so far north, were bundled in layers but still shivered when the wind found them. The north wind can cut right through you, Penrose muttered. No matter how many clothes you wear, it feels like you stand naked. Joffrey's face had gone purple with cold. Frost rimmed his lashes when he blinked. The King's Road had become a frozen track by the time they reached the Gift, the territory that belonged to the Night's Watch. The first settlement they encountered was not a settlement at all, but a ruin. Crumbled roofs, fallen walls, a lone stone chimney, and an inn that had long ago become a skeleton. A dozen apple trees crouched around the ruins like old guards. Beyond them lay a lake. On an island in the lake stood a squat stone tower whose upper walls were painted gold. Despite the melancholy of deserted houses and dead hearths, the place had a peculiar peace. A village, an inn, a lakeside stronghold, Penrose said, picking at a lump of frozen dirt and watching it fall apart. Such a good spot. Why leave it? Because wildlings come, over the wall or down from the mountains, to steal and to take women, Benjen said, sweeping his eyes over the empty fields. The Watch is no longer what it was. We cannot guard 30 miles of wall. Folks move south when men fail to keep them safe, and many villages die. Arthur's gaze lingered on the golden crown atop the tower. This is Queen's Crown, he said. The tower had been named for Queen Alysanne Targaryen, who, the tale went, had once rested in that tower for the night. In gratitude, the villagers had painted the topmost stones gold. Arthur decided to spend the night in the tower. Beneath the ring of lake around the island, a hidden causeway of stone lay just below the surface, wide enough for a man, but concealed by the water. From above it looked as if the path ran straight to the gate, but beneath the lake it zigzagged, 1/3 of the island's width one way, then back the other. The turns were intended to catch attackers in the open. The underwater stones were coated with a slick algae that made the footing treacherous. The door was still heavy oak, but the wood had warped with age and no longer closed cleanly. The tower rose 5 stories. The 3rd floor had murder holes, the 4th offered narrow windows, the 5th was a circular chamber with arched balconies on 3 sides, and on the 4th, a latrine whose chute ran straight down to the lake. From the top, Arthur could see road and ruin, lake and forest, and he liked what he saw. If the gift grew colder farther north, this spot was sheltered enough for something new to be built. Arthur used the oath of the peach garden there, once in the ruins of the village and again on the plain south of the tower, then found Benjen. "This place will do," he said. "It's a fine site for the peach garden estate." Benjen's eyes brightened. "Is it? Send men to plant peach trees where I pointed," Arthur told him. Chapter 268, The Great Wall. The gods created 7 wonders, but humans made 9. Arthur pulled his mount to a halt and stared up at the great gray-blue wall of ice. It rose 700 feet into the sky and ran as far as the eye could see, a man-made marvel that deserved its place among the 9 wonders alongside the Titan of Braavos. He was not the only one struck dumb. Every member of the party seeing the wall for the first time showed a stunned expression beneath their furs. Yoren, who had served the Night's Watch for more than 30 years, was used to it. He snorted, spoiling the moment. "Most folks look at it like you do the first time," he said. "But stay a month, a year, 10 years, 30, your whole life, and it becomes just a big block of ice that occasionally melts and falls apart. Only this block's taller and longer than the rest." The guards who had accompanied Arthur merely observed, but John, Joffrey, and the 2 farm boys all went quiet. Benjen shot Yoren a look. "Brother Yoren, you scare the new men." A nearby brother grinned. "How long did it take you to figure that out and then run off to be a ranger?" "I didn't take to ranging to run away." Yoren looked the 4 new recruits over. "Brother Jeffer," he jabbed a thumb in Joffrey's direction, "when your enthusiasm is ground down and the cold winds freeze you through, what will keep you here?" "The brothers in black. We depend on one another. Without rangers like me, where would you find men to depend on?" Arthur suspected Yoren was trying to steal the newcomers, but hearing Joffrey and John addressed as brother nearly made him laugh. They rode through Rat Village, the few settlements of the Gift, then half a league north along the King's Road to the Wall's Foot and the Night's Watch stronghold, Castle Black. The ancient fortress had walls only on its northern face. Its other sides lay open. The complex was a jumble of stone towers and wooden bulwarks. At the training yard, Benjen introduced Arthur, and the reception was unexpectedly grand. The Lord Commander himself, Bear Old Jor Mormont, came forward with a group of senior officers and offered lodging in the King's Tower, reserved for honored guests. Jeor was thick and powerful, hairless on top with a shaggy gray beard that hung to his chest. In the Lord Commander's study, the fire popped in the hearth. "Arthur, thank you for coming to Castle Black and for aiding the watch." On a shelf, a raven pecked and ruffled its feathers, then emitted a croaky human imitation. "Lord Commander, you are too kind," it said. Arthur's curiosity about the talking bird subsided quickly. "I grew up at Winterfell," Arthur said, "and read the old accounts of the Wall and what lies beyond. I know the Night's Watch's duty and burden. I'm glad to help." Jeor Mormont nodded. "About your survey of the Peach Garden site, I finished it on the way here." Arthur indicated Penrose. The attendant produced a rolled map from his satchel and spread it on the table. Arthur pointed to the marked location. "This spot will do for peach trees." He handed Penrose a small bag of stones, peach pits, and Penrose passed them to Bowen Marsh, the quartermaster, round-faced and ruddy as a pomegranate. Bowen looked at the map. "That's Postern Gate. That village has been empty a long time." "Better than barren ground," Jor said without hesitation. He gave orders. "Othel, lead the builders to Postern Gate and repair the houses. Bowen, gather the stewards and plant the peach trees." A few years before, when peach wine had been made at the Wolfswood Peach Garden, Jor had sent Bowen to try planting peaches in the Gift. The attempt failed. The soil was poor, the weather harsh, and few trees took, let alone fruited. Maester Aemon learned Arthur had grown peaches in Dorne and suggested inviting him to select a site. It was on that advice Arthur had been summoned. "Very well, Lord Commander." Chief builder Othel, who had been examining one of Arthur's blades, obliged. Arthur added, I brought dragonglass blades forged from melted obsidian. The old books call obsidian dragonglass, and like Valyrian steel, it's keen against the others. 70 of them were shipped here. Please see they're given to the brothers who go beyond the wall. He received puzzled looks. Bowen Marsh scoffed. Others, those are legends from 1,000 years ago. Jeor Mormont, thoughtful, said, 1 horn for returning brothers, 2 for enemies, 3 for others. People might treat others as stories to frighten children, but we of the Watch must never forget them. Chief builder Othel, who had nicked a finger on the blade, sucked the cut and praised the workmanship. Obsidian is sharp but brittle. I never thought forging could fix that. The craft and the material are both excellent. Right, Jeor said, dismissing him. With seeds and land sorted, you two prepare for the peach garden. Give the dragonglass to Benjen. He'll know which rangers can use them. When the builders left, Jeor poured Arthur a cup of warmed wine. I'm getting Benjen ready to lead a ranger party to look for Jon Royce's son. The boy disappeared on his first ranging. Your blades may help. Arthur sipped. The wine burned his throat, but chased the cold away. Uncle Benjen told me. I heard a ranger named Garrod broke his vows, fled, and was executed. That was my failing. Jeor put his hands toward the fire. That Royce lad was green as spring grass, but insisted on leading the patrol himself, said it was a knight's duty. I didn't want to offend his father, Lord Royce, so I let him go. What was worse, I sent 2 of my best men with him. Foolish. The raven croaked. Foolish. Jeor ignored it. Garrod had been here longer than me. I thought he'd never renounce his vows until his head was sent to Winterfell. And that Royce boy, there's been no word. 1 deserter and 1 missing. Arthur felt the gravity. A brother who breaks his vows is not common, especially one who's long served. That's not normal. It is odd, Jeor admitted. I'll send more men with Benjen. House Royce still supports the Watch, and I owe them answers. They discussed other matters. Trade with the wildlings at Eastwatch by the Sea and the Watch's supplies. Arthur had used his fleet to sell grain to the wildlings, easing hostilities and recruiting some as mercenaries for Essos. Jeor admitted those arrangements had helped, but warned of winter. When the port freezes, the Watch could not live on the gift alone. They needed to store grain. Arthur knew what Jeor implied. Take the grain trade for the Watch, and the wildlings would be left with little. If the wildlings had no food, they'd either migrate south or join the fleets. Either outcome suited Arthur well. He offered a compromise. We'll provide a loan, he said. The Watch can buy grain and supplies through credit, and I'll charge only a token interest. Jeor's face relaxed. That would be a relief. The raven squawked its approval. After they agreed on sums, terms, and rates, the conversation ran late. Arthur did not take the King's Tower lodging the commander had offered. Instead, he walked past it toward the pale ice behind the round tower. Are you going up on the wall? Penrose asked, following. Stepping out of the warm tower into the bitter air made the attendant wince. He pulled his cloak tight. There's a saying in the North, he who has not been to the wall is no true man. Having come this far, I must see it from the top. If it's too cold, you can wait inside. I'll come with you, Penrose insisted. There are 2 ways up, a timbered zigzag stair set into the south face, bolted and frozen into the ice, winding up like a lightning bolt, or an iron hoist that carries men and supplies. Most took the hoist. Arthur and Penrose stepped into the iron cage, looped to a winch, and Arthur pulled the bell's rope 3 times. The cage was meant to carry 10 men, or the equivalent weight of supplies. They stood together as the winch strained. At first, the ascent was rough, then steadied. As the ground receded, Penrose gripped the bars with wide eyes. Arthur, used to the sky from Sharpwing's vantage, was content to drink in the view. Below, the training yard looked tiny. Recruits drilled and sparred, Jon and Joffrey among them, their instructors keeping a watchful eye. The towers and courtyards became small, cracked shapes. To the south, Rat Village lay half a league away on the King's Road. Rivers shimmered, braided across the frozen plain, reflecting the low sun. Beyond, the world fell away to wind-battered hills and snow-dotted wilds. Halfway up, a voice from behind called out, and the cage lurched to a halt, hanging and swaying while the ropes creaked. After a quick check of names, a burly brother resumed winding, and the cage moved again, angling toward the wall itself. When they reached the parapet, a watchman warned them to be careful and returned to the hut beneath the crane to warm by a brazier. The wind on top screamed colder than anywhere below. Penrose did not last long. He turned back to the hut. Arthur walked to a wooden platform that jutted north and peered out over the wall. Beyond stretched a white world of forest, hills, and wasteland. He stood a quarter hour in the stinging air before the cold claimed him, and he drew back. On the path back toward Castle Black, something curious happened. The long dormant panel of his system flickered and came to life. Chapter 269, Fire Attack. Fire Attack. A chance to imbue a single object with fire magic. The better the object's affinity for fire, the higher the chance of success, and the stronger the enhancement. Arthur attributed unlocking Fire Attack at the wall not just to the ice and stone, but to an older kind of magic woven into the place. Magic that keeps others and wights from approaching. Since others and wights abhor flame and can be destroyed by fire, dragon crystal blades, and Valyrian steel, it all fit a consistent pattern. When Arthur first learned the skill, he immediately thought of testing it on sponge iron, smelted from obsidian and iron, to see if Valyrian steel could be forged that way. Lacking the right materials, he began with a dragon crystal sword. The system allowed only 2 stratagem cards a day, unless he used Take Something from Nothing to increase daily usage, so he spent the next 3 days using Fire Attack on the blade 7 times. Success didn't come until the 7th attempt. When it worked, the dark parts of the blade, already wrapped in soft steel, grew even blacker. The small exposed patterns on the blade deepened into the perfect rippling black of Valyrian steel. Arthur was delighted. Beyond dragon crystal and the sword, he now believed Valyrian steel, dragon eggs, dragons, and even Targaryens with Dragon King blood would be highly compatible with fire magic. Targaryens were supposed to be extinct in Westeros, but at Castle Black there happened to be 2 of them, Jon and Maester Aemon. Early that morning, Arthur left his warm room in the king's tower, though he wasn't going to test the skill on Jon. Today, Benjen, by order of the Old Bear, was taking the Rangers out to investigate Waymar Royce's disappearance. As Arthur reached the gate to the outside, over 40 brothers of the Night's Watch were already saddling and organizing their gear, each carrying a dragon crystal sword. Among them were his uncle Benjen, Sir Avery, the former lord of Night's Rest Keep, whom Arthur had sent to the Watch when he failed to answer Starfall's summons, and a few Dornish faces. Arthur had spoken with Sir Avery in recent days, telling him about the trouble with Night's Rest Keep and how his daughter Linda had been saved from ruin. Sir Avery had been grateful, pleased to hear his daughter had married and had children. Arthur stepped up to the assembled men and saw Benjen arguing with Jon, who looked reluctant to let him go. "Uncle Benjen." Arthur handed Benjen the enhanced dragon crystal sword he'd made. "Sir Waymar is missing, and Garrett has broken his oath. Things are abnormal. Be careful out there." Benjen strapped the sword to his belt and smiled. "The Old Bear and I spoke on this. I'll be careful." He jerked his chin at the Rangers. "Besides, every Ranger has one of your dragon crystal swords now. Others, or whatever else lurks out there, won't take us easily." Arthur warned him, remembering an old text. "When others appear, there will be a cold wind and white mist. Horses and hounds will be spooked. They hate sunlight and bonfires." Benjen set down a pack he was tying to a saddle and pulled Arthur into a brief hug. Despite their vows to cut ties with family, warmth still held in his heart. "Don't worry, I'll bring the men back. I am the first Ranger, not that boy Jon who still smells of summer." His teasing made Jon's face flush. The bastard mumbled and did not answer. "Jon wanted to come," Benjen confided quietly to Arthur. "He doesn't yet understand what the Watch is. Help him, Arthur, as you help others." "I will." Benjen finished his preparations and led his men through the passage beyond the wall. The entry was a long, narrow corridor with 3 iron grates and hidden murder holes above each door. The outermost gate was solid oak, 9 inches thick. It took 4 or 5 men on the winch to open it. After seeing the Rangers off, Arthur walked back with Jon to his tower, leaning, battlements crumbling, the courtyard full of rubble. They sat by Jon's hearth. Arthur stroked Ghost's neck and said, "I hear they're calling you Lord Snow. Seems you're on the fast road to Lord Commander." Don't call me that, John muttered, feeding a few dry logs into the fire. It doesn't suit me. You've run into trouble, haven't you? Arthur asked when John went quiet. Arthur talked of the lessons his father had given him while he managed Peach Garden in Wolfswood, that a leader must speak to his people, learn them, and let them learn him. You can't expect men to die for someone they don't know. If you truly want to be Lord Commander, understand every man in the watch, then let them understand you. It's hard, John said. Only hard things are worth doing. Picking on farm boys who don't know swordplay isn't skill. Arthur smiled. The watch is a strange mix. Noble men who came for honor, like Benjen, and more often farm lads pressed into service. Once they take the vows, that's it. Now, how they're treated depends on what they can do. Put aside your prejudices and learn them. Let them learn you. John thought, then nodded. I'll try. Arthur seized the moment. He touched John and used fire attack on him. John, in the middle of thinking how to reach his new comrades, felt a warmth surge through his chest, spreading to limbs and bones with each heartbeat. It was subtle, but it steadied him. Arthur left John's tower and went to the Lord Commander's chambers. The old bear saw him in and produced a letter. From the south, he said, I thought you'd want to see it. It was a battle report. Sir Edmure Tully, obeying the king's summons, had mustered men at River Run and sent Lord Vance and Lord Piper to guard the pass below Golden Tooth to block a Lannister advance. Taking the pass was strategy, but against a much larger force, it was like sending lambs to a tiger. Lord Tywin's army, assaulting from higher ground, crushed the defenders. Lord Vance fell. Piper led the remnants back to River Run, but was pursued by Adam Marbrand's cavalry all the way to River Run's gates. It seems Robert's war with the Westerlands will not be so simple, Arthur observed. The old bear nodded. The Westerlands' initial victories would lift their morale and harden local resistance. Tywin didn't have to worry about holding King's Landing in this version of events. He could concentrate on the key passes and the mountain castles that made the West hard to take. It's a setback, but only that, the old bear said. Lord Stark has moved the northern host south. He's reached the Neck. His Majesty has about 30,000 men gathered, and Lord Stannis commands the royal fleet. Arthur raised an eyebrow. The Night's Watch is supposed to be neutral in the realm's disputes. Why are you so concerned? We may not take sides, but the Watch is affected by their wars, the old bear answered. Winter is coming. Mance Rayder gathers beyond the wall. The strange things you told me about, this place needs help more than ever. At that moment, a raven in the courtyard let out its sharp cry, as if to agree. After discussion, Arthur agreed to let the Night's Watch join the Narrow Sea trade fleet and finance the building of 7 merchant ships, a loan that would strengthen the Watch's standing and supply lines. He also asked that John, once he'd sworn the Black, be taken as the old bear's steward so he could learn the duties that would make him a proper leader. The old bear understood Arthur's aim. John should gain experience across the Watch's branches and be prepared to succeed Benjen as Lord Commander. Arthur suggested sending Sir Alliser Thorne to Summer City to oversee ship construction and serve as the Watch's liaison there. The old bear winced at the name. Alliser and John had never gotten along. Arthur shrugged and offered to pay Alliser's salary and expenses so the man could do the job properly. I won't interfere with internal appointments, Arthur said. But the old bear had another idea. Sir Andrew Tarth, milder and related to Lord Selwyn Tarth, could take over as master-at-arms. Fine, the old bear said after consideration. Once the contract is signed, Alliser will depart. Everything moved swiftly. The next day, Sir Andrew arrived from Shadow Tower and began drilling recruits. When practice ended, John came running to the king's tower. Did you get the old bear to transfer Sir Alliser? Arthur grinned. I thought Alliser would do better overseeing the shipyards. Sharp tongue, strict, better at hard supervision than teaching. He'll be useful there. John frowned, but then seemed to accept it. The Watch needs every man it can get, even Alliser. Arthur gave him a thumbs up. You're learning fast. Keep at it. John was leaving on the morning after next. He smiled thinly and then, suddenly earnest, listed messages for his family that he asked Arthur to deliver. Tell Robb that John will be Lord Commander one day and that he might as well learn needlework with the girls. Tell Mikken to melt down his sword and make horseshoes out of it. Tell Rickon where I have gone, and that all my things are his to look after. Tell Bran that vows are easy to make and hard to keep. Once you don the black, it is for life. And tell Arya to hide her needle well. Tell her I miss her every moment." When Jon left, Arthur stood a moment longer by the doorway. For an instant, he thought he saw a few strands of silver at Jon's temple, hair that gleamed in the weak castle light. Then, it was gone. We stand our watch for all of time, until death. Penrose rode with the procession out of Castle Black and south along the King's Road. He glanced back at the towering ice of the wall, shivered, and drew his heavy cloak tighter. His months at Castle Black had finally made him understand why some men would sooner lose a hand or their head than wear the black. "Kid, are you thinking of leaving the wall?" Yoren asked, leaning over. "You seem devoted enough. Why not swear the oath and join the Night's Watch? We need every strong arm, even a boy's." Penrose straightened instantly. "I've already sworn to serve a knight. I have my duties." Arthur grinned. "Penrose, if you want to join the watch, I'll respect your decision." Penrose's face went red. "My lord, there's no need for that." Baron Swan, the guards, and the 6 Night's Watch quartermasters driving ox carts of supplies to the Crownlands town laughed. Only Ser Alistair Thorne remained grim and silent. They rode on, and when they passed Mouse Village, the quartermasters brought along some of the villagers they'd gathered, women and children. The gift was thinly settled and often raided by wildlings. Even the King's Road was not safe, and the people dared not stray far from their homes. The neglected Crownlands town brightened as life returned. Half the cottages and inns were cleaned, craftsmen repaired the best houses to lodge the villagers and quartermasters, and the concealed stone causeway that led to the lake tower was made visible and easy to use by laying another layer of bricks and stones with wooden frames over it. The peach grove was fenced off. 4 or 5 men were building mud walls from planks and fieldstones. "My lord, all the pits you gave have been planted," Oswell, the chief craftsman overseeing the town's rebuilding, told Arthur in the lake tower, excitement in his voice. "The quartermaster says some saplings are already breaking the soil. It's remarkable." Oswell was a big man with a lantern jaw and a graying beard. Arthur, who had expected this, smiled. "Bear Old will be pleased. In a few years, the brothers of the Watch will eat their own peaches and drink their own peach wine," Yoren said, warming himself at the hearth. "I had peach pie at Winterfell once. It was very good. I don't have high hopes for Three Finger Hobb's cooking, though." "You speak true, Yoren," Oswell chuckled, rubbing his beard. "But if Three Finger Hobb knew you mocked him in front of our honored guest, who knows what curiosities might appear in your next meal at Castle Black." Arthur and his party rested a day in the Crownlands town, then continued south on their route. It took more than half a month to reach Winterfell's east gate. Once their banners were recognized, the great gate opened with a creak. As Arthur led his horse into the training yard, Robb came hurrying down from the main keep, followed by his new captain of the guard, Harrion Morin, and his direwolf, Grey Wind. Arthur handed Penrose the reins and greeted Robb with a smile as he approached. "You have a proper sword now. You look every inch the Lord of Winterfell," Arthur said. Robb wore the cold ice sword Arthur had forged years before. Though his face remained young, he'd begun to let a beard grow. With Uncle Eddard gone south, Robb, nearly a man, had begun taking on the duties of lordship. He looked tired. The weight of rule had already begun to press upon him. After a formal welcome to the Night's Watch men, Robb told Harrion to find quarters for the newcomers and walked Arthur toward the keep. Along the way, Arthur passed on a message from Jon. "When he becomes Lord Commander, he'll know how hard the job is," Arthur said. Behind closed doors, Robb let the lordship's formality drop and shook his head. "Even with Maester Luwin's help, the affairs of Winterfell have me undone." "Is your mother here?" Arthur asked as they entered the council hall. "Where are Bran, Arya, and Rickon? I brought Jon's message for them." "Only Rickon and I are in Winterfell," Robb said, a note of helplessness in his voice. "Rickon's probably playing with Tommen in the Godswood. My mother took Bran and Arya south a week past. Sir Roderick and a troop of guards went with them." Arthur was surprised. "Why go south now?" Maester Luwin, seated at the end of the long table, answered. After the king called the banners, Lady Lysa not only refused to respond but ordered the bloody gate closed, keeping the Vale from answering his summons. The king is furious. Lord Eddard and Lady Catelyn think Lady Lysa's grief and fear since Jon Arryn's death have overwhelmed her. Lady Catelyn thought to go to the Eyrie with the children, to fill the halls with laughter and noise and pull Lady Lysa out of her mourning so she might open the gate and heed the king. Arthur fell silent a moment, then asked, "How do the fighting in the Westerlands and Riverlands stand? Any news?" Robb spread a map marked with troop movements across the table. After Lord Tywin beat Lords Vance and Piper at the Golden Tooth, he didn't press a full assault on Riverrun. He's been sending small detachments across the Red Fork to raid the Riverlands. Uncle Edmure has split his forces to guard the borders and chase these bands, but it's not proving decisive. Robb pointed to a cluster of sigils near Riverrun. Now, the king and Uncle Edmure have gathered their main host at Riverrun and are preparing to move down the river road against the Golden Tooth. Lord Stannis commands the royal fleet on the Red Fork to cut off the Westerlander detachments that have pushed into the Riverlands. Lord Mace has answered the call, Robb continued, and together with Lord Renly's Stormland forces, they're moving on the Westerlands along the Gold Road. "What of the Iron Islands in Dorne?" Arthur asked. "King Balon of the Iron Islands has agreed to attack the Westerlands by sea," Maester Luwin said, "but he demands Theon Greyjoy be returned to him after the war. Prince Doran has sent Prince Oberyn Martell north with Dornish troops to join the war. Lord Mace refused to allow more than 2,000 Dornish to march into the Riverlands, which includes your forces under him. In the end, Oberyn leads a small Dornish contingent, and Lord Randall Tarley and Lord Titus Peake lead a Riverlands detachment attacking the Westerlands from the coastal road. 4 great armies threatening the Westerlands at once." Arthur could not fathom how Tywin Lannister would change his fortunes if the initial Lannister victories had not already come. He studied the maps and understood why Lord Mace limited the Dornish numbers. He did not want Dorne claiming all the glory. He also saw that sending Randall Tarley and Lord Peake along with Oberyn was meant as punishment to the Dornish border lords. "And where are my men now? The coast road?" Arthur asked. "Yes." Robb produced a letter. "This came from your commander. At Lord Mace's request, 1,000 of your men under Gerald Dane left Prince's Pass with Prince Oberyn and have reached Old Oak." Arthur read the letter and, satisfied, let the worry ease. "And Theon Greyjoy?" Robb winced. "He's probably in Wintertown with some girl. He's sulking ever since my father went south without him." "You mean probably?" Arthur said. "Keep someone watching him. Always know where he is." "You think he will run?" Robb asked in surprise. "You worry too much, Arthur. Theon has been my father's ward and lived here with us long enough to be like a brother." Maester Luwin interjected. "War is a strange time. Theon is Lord Balon's only surviving son. Keeping him safe here helps ensure the Iron Islands' loyalty. If anything happened to him, there'd be no way to keep the Ironborn in check." Robb's face went complicated. He sighed. "I'll have someone keep constant watch." He sent a guard out at once to look for Theon. Far to the west, on the salt spray rocks of the Iron Islands, a different sort of watch had woken up with a grating of wood and iron. A wooden crate overhead was being pried open. The sound jolted the man inside. "Jack, are we at Lannisport?" Someone mumbled from within. No answer. "Morris? The Hound?" Only the scrape of iron and a lid thrown back answered him. The crate lurched and tipped, and the small man inside was pitched head over heels onto wet stone. Dizziness cleared slowly, and a woman's voice said, "Welcome to Pike, imp." Pike. The Iron Islands. Tyrion's mind raced. His ship taken by the Ironborn? As his sight steadied, he could make out 3 figures around him. A man on the seastone chair, a broad-chested man, and a young woman toying with a short-handled axe. The Kraken sigils were unmistakable. "I am your captive, King Balon Greyjoy," Tyrion announced cheerfully, pushing himself up on the crate rim. "Bring me to your master, Robert, and take the bounty. The king is generous, 150 gold dragons, half a knight's price." Balon snorted. "We are Ironborn. We take what we want. We don't beg coins from others." Tyrion straightened. "I know, the Ironborn take by the old way rather than buy it, until our good King Robert and his good brother Eddard taught such lessons." The young woman, who Tyrion guessed was Asha Greyjoy, clicked her tongue and said, "You have a sharp tongue, dwarf." The broad man was Victarion, Balon's third brother, back from having met Stannis's fleet before. Tyrion had heard rumors of Euron, the second brother, and his exile. He bowed his head in mock deference to the sea-stone chair. "You think Lannisters will simply bow because odds are against them? Since Robert ordered my brother and sister killed, it's victory or death for my house." Victarion grunted agreement. "Lord Tywin is that sort of man. Before we boarded at Stony Shore, I heard you were serving Robert on the promise your son would be returned from the wolf's den," Tyrion went on, waving a hand. "Do me a favor. Give me a quick knife or a rope. My dear siblings wait impatiently in the next world." Balon's voice was rough. "We take what we want ourselves." Tyrion's eyes narrowed. "You mean to release me?" Balon answered, "We need you to go back to Casterly Rock and tell Lord Tywin we'll make a feint against Lannisport. Burn part of the harbor, take what we can, then retreat, claiming we lack the forces to hold it." "You want a feint?" Tyrion asked. "To make Robert think my family's heads are safe, and so your son Theon will be returned." "If he can be returned, better," Balon said. A savage light flashed in his eyes. "If he cannot, then so be it. What is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger." Tyrion considered. "I will not lie for you without assurance. I need a hostage." Victarion barked a laugh. "Dwarf, are you mad?" Tyrion fixed Balon with a steady look. "And a hostage of weight. My lord father is not one moved by words alone. If you want me to do this, you must make him believe." The hall grew still. Tyrion added, "You want vengeance on Robert. We are his enemies. I will deliver the lie, and I guarantee the hostage's safety until Lannisport is burned." Balon looked to his daughter. "Asha, father," she said, sliding her axe back into its sheath and pounding a fist to her chest with fierce delight. "If this is your will, I will be your hostage." She cried the iron-born oath, voice booming in the hall. "What is dead may never die." Chapter 271, Find Your Seat, Lannisport. Tyrion stepped off the Lion's Mouth pier onto the soil of his youth and felt, inexplicably, a wash of security. There was a bounty on his head. He had traveled by night, rested by day, crossed the Wolfswood to the Stony Shore, and finally boarded a ship. He had 2 attendants and the Hound with him, met halfway, and the hardships of the journey had been beyond telling. Word had reached the city guards, and Davin Lannister, who held watch at Lannisport, came racing down to the pier. "Tyrion?" Surprise flashed across Davin's face. "I did not expect you back from the north." As if noticing how abrupt that sounded, Davin added, "I mean, the north is 1,000 miles away, and the sea lanes were blockaded by the Ironborn." Behind Tyrion, the captain of the small merchant vessel tucked his chin and looked guilty. "Cousin," Tyrion said, pointing a stubby finger, "see that this captain has enough gold to last him a lifetime. A Lannister always pays his debts. That is why I am standing here after 1,000 miles." "Is that so?" Asha Greyjoy dropped nimbly onto the pier from the ship, a faint, unreadable smile on her face. She wore no kraken ornaments. Her hair was cropped short and black, making her look more like a thin man than a lord's daughter. Tyrion had found a flat-bottomed merchantman at the Stony Shore. He had not hidden who he was. He had told the captain the truth and promised payment. When the captain learned Lannisport was blockaded by the Ironborn and that Tyrion's face would make him recognizable, he had tried to hide Tyrion in a crate, hoping the Ironborn would not search it. Fate, however, had intervened. Instead of discovery leading to peril, fortune had followed. Tyrion half believed King Balon's hatred of the throne was sincere and not merely a pretext. After the guards had led the overjoyed captain and crew away to collect their reward, Tyrion added, "And thanks to the lady as well." He then turned to Davin. "Where is my father?" "Lord Tywin is at Oxcross," Davin said, glancing at Asha and lowering his voice. "And are Jaime and Cersei?" Tyrion told his men to prepare horses without answering directly. "How does my father take it?" he asked instead. Davin answered in a low tone, "Lord Tywin calls it malicious slander. He says the king executed the queen and Jaime on baseless charges, as Aerys did to the Stark father and son." Tyrion led the way off the pier, introducing Asha as they walked. "You see, my father reads a situation quickly. He will understand your intentions." Asha raised an eyebrow and said nothing. Tyrion asked, "What's the talk in the city?" Davin walked beside him. The most common tale in Lannisport is that the king is more inept than King Aegon, and long resented the queen's meddling and the restrictions on his visits to whores. Some say he found an excuse to kill the queen and her brother Jaime to clear the way to legitimize his bastards. Tyrion stopped and cocked his head, a strange look crossing his face. So people think Cersei is Queen Nerys, Jaime is Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight, and Joffrey is the true King Daeron. Only his birth was questioned by Aegon. Davin blinked. That's what they say. Tyrion shrugged. What people believe is always influential. Too bad Joffrey already took the black and went to the wall. Davin went on. Some foreign merchants say the king wants to rid himself of his creditors to wipe out the huge debts owed to House Lannister. Tyrion barked a short laugh. I'd like to see our archbishop, the Iron Bank of Braavos, and the creditors from the free cities hear that and forgive our good King Robert his debts. They passed through the Golden Lion Square beside the pier. The broad plaza had been turned into a training ground. Lannisport's Red Cloaks drilling a vast new levee, easily 10,000 recruits by the look of it. The shouts of instructors, the clang of steel on steel, the rattle of spears, everything sounded reassuring in Tyrion's ears. On the ride toward the stables, and during the conversation with Davin, Tyrion learned more of the Westerlands situation. Davin now commanded the new recruits and had been put in charge of guarding Lannisport against Balon's sea attacks. Lannisport was one of the Seven Kingdoms' great ports, the largest city in the Westerlands and a vital junction of the Ocean Road, the Gold Road, and the River Road. It could not be lost. As for Lord Tywin, after crushing the remnants of the Riverland forces under Piper and Vance, he had sent his beasts, Gregor Clegane, Amory Lorch, and Vargo Hoat, across the Red Fork to harry the Riverlands. Then he had moved his main army back to the Westerlands, stationing it at Oxcross. From there, he could supply his forces and threaten any army trying to advance on Casterly Rock via the Gold Road or the River Road, preventing them from capturing strongpoints and allowing 4 Westerlands armies to coordinate their attacks. Tyrion admired how, even in such peril, his father managed the broader picture and arranged things to serve the family's interests. At the stables, Tyrion's man chose a gentle brown mare for him. He made no stop at Casterly Rock. With Asha, the hound, and his attendants, he rode straight to Oxcross and arrived in a day and a half. The village around Oxcross had been requisitioned. A wide camp of red tents climbed the hillside, orderly and compact, their poles adorned with many Westerlands banners. The burning tree of House Marbrand, the black-hooded cloak of House Banefort, the purple unicorn of House Brax, and countless red and gold Lannister standards swelled in the breeze. Outside the village, men erected works, palisades, watchtowers, trenches. Scouts and sentries were everywhere. Even coming from the rear, they passed 3 groups who challenged and then waved them on. At the camp gate waited Adam Marbrand in gray-white armor, etched with the burning tree. Tyrion slid gracefully from his saddle. "Sir Adam," he said, "I heard of your work in the Riverlands. No victory, only vengeance." Adam's voice was tight with grief and rage. He was tall, lean, with dark copper hair falling to his shoulders. "My condolences, Tyrion. We will avenge what was done to Jaime and Cersei." "Justice," Tyrion echoed. Adam Marbrand had been a page at Casterly Rock and a childhood companion of Jaime's. He rode like a man who had never been afraid in his life. Tyrion hoped he kept his fury. Rage could blind a man, but it could also steel him. Courage, after all, was what a cavalry commander needed most. Chapter 272, Situation in the Western Territory. Duke Tywin's command tent stood at the center of the camp. Tyrion told the captain of the guard posted outside to prepare food and drink for him and his guest, then stepped inside. Around the table, Tywin and his only remaining brother, Sir Kevan Lannister, were bent over a map. Tyrion? Kevan was the first to look up. Compared to Duke Tywin, who was over 50 but still had the hard, lean body of a younger man, Kevan was soft, almost bald, with a fleshy chin and a close-trimmed yellow beard. Tyrion bowed. "Uncle Father, it's good to see you." Tywin's pale green eyes, flecked with gold, moved from the map to him. "We thought you'd been captured as well." A small hope flickered in Kevan's face. "My son Lancel and Tyrek, did they come back with you?" "I felt something was wrong and called to them before slipping away," Tyrion said, sliding into a chair. A helplessness passed across his face. "They're Robert's squires. They obey the king before kin. They stayed. If they're not dead, they're likely in Winterfell's dungeons." Kevin's disappointment was plain. What happened at Winterfell? How did it all go so wrong? Before Tyrion could answer, Tywin cut him off. "What is done is done. No point in mourning. Those who shed Lannister blood will pay for it. Even the king will not go unscathed." "Tyrion on the nose," Tyrion agreed. He glanced at the map. "How is the war going?" "The situation is grim." Kevin tapped the map where the road from the Riverlands runs. "King Robert and Duke Eddard have a combined host from the Crownlands, the North, and the Riverlands, somewhere between 50 and 60,000 men, besieging Golden Tooth. Lord Leo Lefford and Sir Fowler Prester defend it with 10,000. They've repelled assaults, but the enemy is building engines. We expect a full siege soon." He pointed south along the Golden Road. "Renly and Lord Mace bring another force from the Riverlands and the Stormlands, 60 to 70,000. We ceded Silverhill to them to avoid a costly stand. One of their armies is marching west on the Golden Road, the other north along a tributary of the Mander, trying to squeeze the 10,000 men in Deep Den, Lord Linton Liddon and Lord Charlton, between them." Kevin indicated the coastal road. "A flanking force from the Riverlands under Lord Randall Tarley, with Dornish men led by Prince Oberyn, numbers 7 to 8,000. They linger on the border of the Westerlands and have acted cautiously, as if afraid our main army will appear. Lord Roland Crakehall reported Prince Oberyn took Dornish troops into the Riverlands after the Mountain and Sir Amory Lorch." Finally, he frowned at the western coastline on the map. "At sea, we know little. The Ironborn have blocked the coast. Lord Seth Farman of Fair Isle sent word that the Iron Islands gather longships. It's not just a blockade or the odd coastal raid. They seem ready for more." Tyrion listened and pursed his lips. "So it's more than bad. We're surrounded on every side." "It's not quite as hopeless as it sounds." Tywin's voice was steady. "Lord Randall is a famed general, but despised in the Riverlands. With Oberyn taking Dornish forces away, the coastal threat is reduced. Renly and Mace have numbers, but Mace has won few victories, and Renly is no Stannis. His command hasn't been proven. We let them take Silverhill to let them claim the first glory, hoping they'd press on recklessly, abandon Deep Den, and push deeper into the Westerlands." Tyrion spread his hands. "But it looks like your ploy has failed." Kevin, sensing the mockery, said soberly, "We are at a severe disadvantage. The Westerlands alone cannot hope to match the Seven Kingdoms besieging us. Holding what we have will be difficult." Tywin ignored Tyrion's sarcasm. "The real dangers are Robert and Balon Greyjoy. Robert may be an incompetent king, but he's brilliant on the battlefield. With Lord Stark at his side, they will be hard to beat. And Balon's fleet threatens us by sea. Land attacks can be traced and checked by our hills and fortifications, but the coastline is vulnerable to a large Ironborn landing, so we must be cautious." He looked sidelong at Tyrion. "You traveled thousands of miles to escape the north and think to amuse us with tales? You've served your purpose. You may go." "Not at all, father." Tyrion's voice grew earnest. "I suffered to get here. I walked the Wolfswood, took a ship at Stony Shore, and yes, was packed into a box." Tywin rose abruptly. "This is a time of war for House Lannister. I have no patience for your tall tales." "Father," Tyrion said, leaning forward, "you will be very interested in the guest I brought from the Iron Islands." Kevin's surprise was immediate, then he understood. "The Westerlands coast is blockaded by the Ironborn. You couldn't have come by ship." "I couldn't bypass them," Tyrion admitted. "They took me to Pike, but King Balon told me he will not attack the Westerlands at the Iron Throne's bidding. He wants revenge on Robert and Stark if we will help him." "What help?" Kevin's brow knitted. "Balon Greyjoy's son is a hostage in Winterfell. Did they trick you?" Tyrion told them of his time on Pike and of Balon's plan to feign an attack and burn Lannisport, using that threat in exchange for his son. As he spoke, his guest from the Iron Islands was shown into the tent. Tywin had sat back down, his face unreadable. At last he said, "Tyrion, where are your manners? Introduce our guest." Tyrion stood and swept an arm toward the woman who followed him. She was lean and sea-tanned, hair dark and eyes sharp. "This is Asha Greyjoy," he said, "the king's daughter." Chapter 273, Return to White Harbor. White Harbor will always welcome you, Arthur. Arthur had just arrived in White Harbor from Winterfell along the White Knife, and Lord Wyman received him with unmistakable warmth. He was invited to dine in the Lord's private solar. Present at the table, besides Lord Wyman and Arthur, were members of the Manderley household, Lady Rhea, Lord Wyman's daughter-in-law, his two granddaughters, Wilfred and Vera, and his cousin Sir Marlon, captain of the White Harbor garrison. Lord Wyman's two sons were absent. Willis and Sir Wendell had already gone south with their uncle Eddard, leading White Harbor's levies to fulfill their feudal duty. Arthur studied the familiar yet strange faces around the table, especially Wilfred, who sat to his right, and for a moment found himself at a loss for words. Lord Wyman, nibbling on a piece of soft bread, chuckled and said, "A few days ago, we had Lady Catelyn and her party here. She, Sir Roderick, and her children sailed on to Gulltown to comfort her sister, Lady Lysa. Lady Catelyn told me Lady Lysa sent a secret letter saying the former hand had been harmed by the Queen. She was terrified, and that's why she did not respond to the king's summons and sealed the bloody gate." "That is odd." Lord Wyman's round face creased into a thoughtful squint. "King Robert has marched on the Westerlands. Logically, Lady Lysa should have been among the first to ride. Her husband's death should spur her to avenge him. Everyone can see the difference in strength between the sides. Even the late Lord Frey has sent men to the war. However frightened or sorrowful Lady Lysa may be, she should not have acted like this. Father, perhaps the repeated miscarriages and stillbirths drove her to madness," Lady Rhea said softly from her seat. "I have mourned a child once. Watching a life fade like that can break a mother." Lord Wyman stroked his layered chin and called to his other granddaughter, who sat by Lady Rhea. "Vera, what is House Tully's saying?" Vera, her hair streaked green and her eyebrows tinted gold, as if trying on the latest fashions, answered without missing a beat, "Family, duty, honor." "So she has set aside family, duty, and honor," Lord Wyman said. "I am very uneasy about Lady Catelyn's journey." Despite his worry, Lord Wyman's appetite did not falter. Between remarks, he kept shoveling food into his mouth, his plump hand busy with eel pie and bread as the servants refilled his plate. Sir Marlon observed, "My lord, the situation is clearer than it looks. The Westerlands are strong under Lord Tywin, but they cannot withstand a four-pronged attack. And there's word Silverhill in the Westerlands was taken by Lord Mace." Wyman, mid-bite of his favorite eel pie, laughed so hard his bulk trembled. "My sons will fight like wolves. They've always been mighty. They will surely win honor in the field." Lady Rhea's face tightened with sorrow. "I only pray Willis and the others come back safe." Wilfred reached for her hand. "Mother, have faith. Incest is an abomination the Seven do not forgive. The gods will bless the side that acts righteously." 6 years had passed since Arthur last saw the girl. Wilfred still wore a neat hunting doublet and riding breeches that showed a slender figure grown into womanhood. Her round, slightly childish face had become very pretty. A gentle confidence softened her features. A small silver seven-pointed star hung at her throat, catching the candlelight. Arthur found himself puzzling over the Manderley likeness. Almost all the men in the house were broad and heavy, while the women were slim and graceful. He remembered an older cousin, Danella, still attractive despite years. Perhaps, he thought idly, the family's resemblance to their sigil had something to do with it. After swallowing another piece of eel pie, Lord Wyman turned to Arthur. "Sir Arthur, you made your name in the Red Mountains, yet you did not ride to the Westerlands to win glory. You went to the Wall instead. Why?" Arthur answered plainly, telling of the coming winter, the others, the gathering of wildling forces under Mance Rayder, the increased desertions among the Rangers, even a veteran of 30 years who had left the watch. Wilfred and Vera listened, their necks instinctively shrinking. Lady Rhea's rosined. She rose abruptly and excused herself, saying she would go to the sept to pray. Lord Wyman chewed unperturbed. "Others Whites, giants. Most of that, in my view, is Night's Watch talk to win aid and donations," he said. "Mance Rayder, the king beyond the wall, is another matter. The free folk grow up hard and fierce, but they lack armor and proper weapons. If they come down from the hills, the North's warriors will show them why they live north of the wall." "If that's true," Arthur said, lifting a silver cup and taking a sip, Then why would our ancestors build a wall 300 miles long and nearly 700 feet high at its tallest? I have seen it. If it was only to keep out wildlings, such a wonder would be unnecessary. The records say the Night's Watch once numbered tens of thousands, Arthur continued. The abandoned towers and castles around Castle Black back that up. That may be so, Lord Wyman conceded, but there have been no confirmed sightings of others for thousands of years. All right, Wyman added with a sigh. Perhaps you young folk enjoy tales of the strange. I suppose my granddaughter Wilfred will want to hear more. I'll be eating for another hour or so. Sir Arthur, forgive me, I can't keep you. Lord Wyman's hospitality has been more than kind, Arthur said, and after further thanks he rose and left the small solar. Wilfred followed him a moment later. As they stepped into the fading light, Arthur noticed a flush on her cheek. He offered, "May I have the honor of showing the pretty Miss Manderley a walk?" Wilfred didn't answer, but took his arm. Her voice was soft as a whisper. "I heard you have a daughter?" Before he could form a reply, a sharp pinch dug into the tender flesh of the arm she held. Arthur startled at the sudden, familiar sting and marveled anew at how girls seemed born knowing just how to pinch.